First of all, I apologize about last week, but there were a number of you who ran out of, didn't either have internet or electricity because of that storm. And so I decided to wait another week for this topic. And this is a topic that is really, really close to my heart. Uh, I would say 99% of this music is totally, completely forgotten. And I find it to be some of the most beautiful outpouring of artistic Jewish music in our history. Obviously, most of this comes in the first part of the 20th century, that is, the 1900s, and the last part of the 19th century, the 1800s. And so what happens is that, I would say the course of history of Jewish music, that is, particularly in America and Israel, might have been tremendously different if it were not for the efforts and inspiration of these small group of composers in Russia originally, at the beginning of the 20th century. It was called the Society for Jewish Folk Music, Gesellschaft für jüdische Volksmusik. And what they tried to do is revive and reinterpret traditional Jewish music in different types of modes, not necessarily major or minor, the traditional Jewish types of music from Eastern Europe, Eastern, not Germany, not Western Europe, but Eastern Europe, within a kind of a newly conceived art music repertoire. And the quality of that and the influence of that, which has not been, obviously the influence is almost nothing because no one knows about this stuff, but certainly has not been fully assessed. I would also posit that a great many of these composers who were part of the society, the music is lost, probably not retrievable. And so I think you can call this a kind of a Jewish music society. It's kind of a school of Jewish music. And so to apply the term school to a group of Jewish composers that lasted about 20 years from 1908 to 1938, and whose influence spread from St. Petersburg through other cultural centers in Russia and to Berlin and Vienna. So that's the outer edge of Eastern Europe, the western edge of Eastern Europe. The question is, what was the element that unites this school to uphold and maintain a purpose, a unanimity of aesthetic purpose and style? There was a common agenda, I think this is the right word. The school was certainly new, since all the young composers were very interested in contemporary, at that point, avant-garde music. They were real professional composers, these people. Although they composed in diverse idioms, they all shared a profound involvement in the revival of a folk culture and its assimilation into art music. In some levels, they were ready to burst out of the shtetl environment into Western society by, in some ways, forcing Jewish music to be part of the overall culture. Now, there was a society called the Society for Private Performance of New Music, and that was headed by an incredibly great composer by the name of Arnold Schoenberg, having nothing to do with the Jewish, the St. Petersburg Music Society. This society, the St. Petersburg one, was much larger than the Schoenberg one, 5 years after after its founding. Here is Joel Engel, and he is, for me, a major, major, major inspiration into my forays into Jewish music. I find his music speaks to my heart in a way that almost no other composer does. For me, it's insanely moving. He's a student of Alexander Taneyev, who was, I wouldn't say part of the Russian Five, Rimsky-Korsakov and all those other composers, but he was like Lyadov, another composer, and other composers like that, kind of I don't want to say second rate. He wrote great music, but he was a Russian composer during that time. And he was a teacher of Joel Engel. And by the way, more about Joel Engel a little later. So by 1920, The society had shifted its main activities to the Moscow branch, but due to anti-Semitism and communist pressures, this branch collapsed around 9 years later, 1929. But the impact of this branch had transformed the climate creativity in Central Europe, Jewish I'm talking about, and also its continuity for the next 10 years until the final shutdown of Jewish culture in 1938. Obviously, during World War II, it was completely shut down. There were many composers that, by the way, this is another example, a photo of Joel Engel. He's the man in the mustache. He used to collect folk music from all around, whenever you can, Jewish folk music. It's amazing. There was another great composer, 20th century, that did the same thing a little south of where Joel Engel was working, and a little after Joel Engel. He was is Bela Bartok, who collected thousands and thousands of pieces of folk music. Both these composers used folk music as an impetus for their art music. So there are other composers. There's a composer, I'm sure you don't know these names, but I want you to be excited about this after this lecture. Israel Brandeman, the cellist. Beautiful music. He's born in 1901, dies in 1992. And he and Engel go and collect folk songs. The group eventually scattered, Engel and Brandeman to other places. Oh, no, excuse me, this is not Brandeman. This is Joachim Struszewski. Brandeman we'll talk about later. But Struszewski was one of these composers. Solomon Rozovsky was one of them. Lazar Saminsky, Moses Milner, Alexander Krein, Michael Neeson, Alexander Veprick. And I just named about 6 or 7 composers, and I want you to really, we'll learn more about them later. Now, they collected, as I mentioned before, folk music. There was another way to create Jewish music, and that is it's a technical term called contrafact. Now, contrafact is when you take text, a Jewish text, and you apply it to a folk song or a popular song of the day. Now, Alexander Grachaninov was a famous Jewish composer, not Jewish, a famous composer in the same way that Taneyev was. He wrote a number of operas. Matter of fact, I think he may have even passed away in the United States. I'm not sure. But he was during Rimsky-Korsakov's time, he was a composer. And he wrote an opera, and from that opera comes a beautiful melody that was used by those people in the first Aliyah and second Aliyah, mainly first Aliyah, that had this yearning, and this is what this chat will be a lot about, a yearning for what that magical place called Israel, the Holy Land, Palestine. That yearning is found in this next song called Mechorati. Now, Mechorati talks about my homeland, the land that I really spiritually belong to, because obviously most of these people, all of them were not born there at that time. They come mainly from Russia, Poland, Eastern Europe, but they had this yearning because of the shtetl life, because of the oppression that they endured, most of them. They yearn for this place where they can finally breathe, finally be spiritually and physically free. This is Mechorati, and it is sung, and we'll talk about her a little more after, by this wonderful singer, I can't tell you how much I love this woman. She meant everything to me in the years when I started, and the first 10, 12 years that I was in Bethel in West Hartford. An incredible singer, Mechorati. And you could see how this song expresses the incredible yearning of the Eastern European Jew in the last part of the 19th and early 20th centuries for that dream of a place, because it was not in reality. Obviously, Theodor Herzl had much to do with this, but many of these people did not know Theodor Herzl. They were yearning for this place, this magical land. And speaking of magical, this is Rachel Saul, the amazing singer that sang that piece. She sang, you know, everybody knows that has heard her sing, the great voice, the incredible technique, the glorious sound of what she did, but also, and for me, the impeccable phrasing and the incredible, wonderful human being that she was. And she will always be an inspiration to me for all time, for as long as I'm around, that's for sure. And I'm just so lucky to have had her sing this song. We move on. I'm not even sure what comes next now, but let's check it out. Okay, let's talk about Joel Engel. He was a critic. He was born in 1868 and died in 1927. Born in Russia, in the Ukraine. Later moved to Berlin, then to Palestine, not Israel yet, but Palestine. Engel has been called the true founding father of the modern renaissance of Jewish music. I know you are all educated, but the question beckons, who's heard of Joel Engel? And most of the ephemeral you have not. And I'm going to just introduce him to you if I can. As a composer, teacher, and organizer, Engel inspired a generation of Jewish classical musicians to rediscover their ethnic roots and create a new style of nationalist Jewish music. Yes, it was modeled after the music movements in Russia, Slovakia, Hungary, and elsewhere in Europe. But this style, developed by these composers that I mentioned, Alexander Krein, Lazar Saminsky, Nissen, Rozovsky, and others, was an important influence on the music of many 20th century composers, as well as on the folk music of Israel. Engel's work in preserving the musical tradition of the shtetl, which is the 19th century Jewish village of Eastern Europe, made possible the revival of klezmer music today. Engel was born Yuli Dmitrievich Engel in the Ukraine, as I mentioned before. His parents were secular Jews. He studied law at the Kharkiv National University, and later, at the urging of well, I was going to say minor composer, but that's just not true, Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, who was a friend of his. He heard his compositions, and Tchaikovsky urged him to go to the Moscow Conservatory. So after Engel graduates the conservatory, he works as the music critic of a Russian paper. He becomes an influential figure in Russian musical life, supporting composers who wrote in the increasingly popular Russian nationalist style that was you know, the five, the great five, Korsakov, Cui, and the other three, I can't remember now, but those composers. And so, but there's a moment in Engel's life that he meets a gentleman, a composer, a critic also, Vladimir Stasov. He's an art critic. Actually, I don't know how much composing he did, but he definitely was involved in that musical world as a critic. So he says to Engel, according to Jacob Weinberg, who's another composer I want to talk about, but we won't have time today. He says to Engel, where is your national pride in your own people? Where is your national pride in your own people? Engel experienced with that question epiphany and takes from that point a profound interest in his Jewish musical roots. So then he starts collecting, this is in the summer of 1900, he starts collecting Jewish folk melodies. The next year he organized lecture concerts in Moscow and St. Petersburg, et cetera, et cetera. Then he starts writing Jewish music himself. In 1908, Engel is probably the primary force to start the St. Petersburg Jewish Music Society. he joins Ensky, Shlomo Ensky in 1912 in an expedition throughout the Pale, which is Ukraine, Poland, Russia, and other countries, to collect folk songs from the Jewish communities. And you saw a picture where he's on that wax cylinder thing where he's trying to, using Thomas Edison's recently invented phonograph. And actually, the phonograph was one of the first uses. Obviously, one of the uses of the phonograph was with ethnomusicological research. So Engel writes incidental music for the Ansky play The Dybbuk, which is a piece of music that many Jewish composers have written about. It was produced at the Habima Theater in Israel and became an international hit for a little while. So in 1922, this is after the Society for Jewish Music, about 14 years old. This society sent Engel, he's still in Russia, on a mission to Germany to promote new Jewish music in the German Jewish community. So he organizes concerts there, including performances of the songs by those composers that I mentioned. By the way, just to let you know, among one of the performers in those concerts was Gregor Piatigorsky. I don't know how many of you know that name, but he was one of the great cellists of the 20th century, as was Heifetz, who also performed in those things. We're talking about some of the great musicians of the time performed the Jewish music in this St. Petersburg Society. So the following year, Engel, the 1923, I believe, yes, he opens up the Yuval Publishing House in Berlin. Engel was dissatisfied with life in Berlin at that point, and then he decides to move to Palestine. So he moves to Palestine in 1924. I remember walking through Tel Aviv. When I go everywhere, and certainly in Israel, I love just walking. And I was walking, he lived in the Jaffa area, kind of right south of Tel Aviv. I'm walking down the street and I see the sign saying, the home of Joel Engel. And at that point, this was maybe, 15 years ago. But at that time, I've been very heavily involved in his music. And it really affected me emotionally. Oh my God, this is where he lived. So be that as it may, he was very warmly welcomed in Palestine. Even so, he had a difficult time adjusting to life there. He says, quote, I was pampered in Moscow and Berlin. Here, no one knows what Engel, the composer, wrote then and what he's writing now. So his health gradually failed, and he passes away in Tel Aviv. Now, the important thing from a technical point of view is that he was one of the first composers to recognize that traditional Jewish music was not based on the major or minor tonal system. And this is him again. Most Jewish songs, this is his writing, are built on the ancient modes, Aeolian, Dorian, Mixolydian, and so on. By the way, the same application is by Leib Glantz, the Cantor we talked about last week, when he talks about the Jewish modes, for the cantorial modes. He feels that they were come from the Greek modes. I want to play you now a piece, Omrim Yeshna Eretz. And I'm going to read the poem. And this poem is by Shaul Chernyakhovsky. He was born in Russia, grew up in a religious home. He attends a modern Hebrew school. He studies Hebrew and Bible, and then enters a Russian school. He's always interested in language, Greek, French, English, German, Latin. He translates tons of poetry. He is a great poet. I wouldn't call him a religious poet, but listen to this poem. They say, and this applies directly to that yearning of the Jewish people for that place, Eretz Yisrael, that place. Obviously, it turns out to be Israel. They say there is a land drenched with sun. Wherefore is that land? Where is that sun? They say there is a land, its pillars, and I'm asking you to remember this poem as best as you can because of when the music I play. Its pillars are 7 planets, spreading up on every hill. Where is that land, the stars of that hill who shall guide our way? Tell me my path. We have already passed several deserts and oceans, and we've traversed several parts of the world, and our strengths are ending. How is it we have gone astray? That not yet have we been left alone? Think of the shtetl. Think of the pogroms. That's my editorial comment. Back to the poem. The land of sun, the one we have not found, a land where it shall come to pass what every man had hoped for. Everyone who enters had met with Akiva. Peace to you, Akiva. Peace to you, Rabbi. Where are the prophets? Where are the Maccabees? Answers him Akiva. Answers him the Rabbi. All of Israel are the prophets. You are the Maccabee. Where is that land? The stars of that hill? Who shall guide our way? Tell me my path. They say there is a land drenched with sun. Wherefore is that land? Where is that sun? Omrim yesh na eretz. Joel Engel, if I can make just a comment, if you hear orchestra in any of these pieces, those are my orchestrations. And I'm not saying that you should like them or not, but I am saying that to express my dedication, my allegiance, my heart, my soul to this music. Omrim yesh na eretz. And this is Ida Kahana, another phenomenal influence in my life. I've written so many pieces with her voice in mind. She's one of the great sopranos, I think, in the world, singing Jewish music. Incredible friend, and always inspires me to write great stuff, or I try to write great stuff. But again, back to that Omrim Yeshna Eretz and the Mechorati, sung so beautifully by these two women, expresses, I want to keep repeating, this is not yet Eretz Yisrael. This is the yearning to go to a place that is meaningful and has the potential of raising us to another level. Moses Milner. Actually, before that, I'm going to play a couple of other pieces of Engel. That's not. Notice I don't know what's ahead of me because I do these PowerPoint things. This is a piece called Hakotel. There is text to it, as Engel wrote. I in the concert, and I think some of you remember the concert. I wanted to give a little reprise from the singing, which is gorgeous, but I wanted to give an instrumental kind of accounting. And this is Hakotel. Hakotel is the Western Wall, and this is Engel's yearning to get to the Western Wall. Obviously, there were some Jews that very few were allowed to go that close, and after Engel passed away for a number of years, they weren't allowed to go anywhere close to the Hakotel. So this is a yearning for the Kotel, for the Holy Temple, to be part of the Jewish experience. And here is Joel Engel. Is for string orchestra, oboe solo, and violin solo. And I'm playing all of these because I want you to listen. This music is stunning, I think. So Joel Engel writes, this is one piece of his that some people might be, I was going to say most, some people might be familiar with. It's a little folk song, Numi, Numi. I'm not sure he wrote the melody, he may have, but it's regarded as a folk song. It's beautifully sung by this, I think it's a is a music student in a conservatory in Israel. Numi Numi. Now, if I can find the opening, here we go. Moses Milner. By the way, just going back to Engel, I hope you can feel some of the beauty in his music. I played you I think three pieces of his, three or four pieces. I don't remember now, but really an incredibly great composer of Jewish music, and he should be certainly much more accepted by the general public, I think. Moses Milner, born in 1886 in Leningrad, died in 1953. Russian Jewish pianist and composer and conductor. Matter of fact, he is the composer of the first Yiddish opera in post-revolutionary Russia, the Himmeln, the Heavens Burn, in 1923. He sang in the choir of the Brodsky Choral Synagogue in Kiev, beautiful synagogue, and then attended the Kiev Conservatory. He studied in the St. Petersburg Conservatory from 1907 till 1915. While he's in that conservatory, he begins to compose Yiddish songs for the Society of Jewish Folk Music. So he also writes incidental music for a number of Jewish theaters. He provides music for the Habima Theater in Tel Aviv and the State Jewish Theater in Moscow and other organizations. A wonderful composer. And again, no one has heard of him. This is going to be a song, the Grüne Kabaimala, the Green Hill. I'm singing it, and the orchestration is mine. But please, this is about a little tree who is yearning to go to sleep and just gets beaten up by the winds and this and that and everything. Finally, it finds the peace to go to sleep. And, if you look at this as an allegory for the Jewish life in Eastern Europe, it certainly is. It certainly is. It's this little helpless tree. And so the tree finally falls asleep. This is Michael Nissen, a wonderful composer. I'm not sure we'll have the chance to play some of his stuff. Let's just do a little of it. This is a variation on a Jewish folk song. We'll play a minute of it. This is a 13, 14-minute work that, you know, I have to say, it reminds me of some of the music of Anton Dvorak, of which there have been societies devoted to his music too, obviously. But this is a wonderful composer, Nissen, Mikhail Fabinovich Nissen, born in 1883. He's born in Russia. He's the son of a rabbi. There are three children. He and his two sisters are all gifted musically speaking. They all go to the Moscow Conservatory. He starts writing Jewish music, music that under that aegis. He actually studies with Korsakov, Rimsky-Korsakov, Glazunov, and Anatoly Lyadov, who's a wonderful composer. In 1905, he's expelled for taking part in a student strike during the revolution in 1905, reinstated the following year. In 1908, is when he starts writing the Jewish music, because he, even though he's a student, he founds, along with Lazar Zeminski, Engel, and the others, the Society for Jewish Music, Folk Music. And so, but during this period, he's a kind of a political composer. He takes part in socialist activities, teaching music to factory workers at workmen's clubs. But much of his work at this time was devoted to traditional Jewish music styles. Obviously, you heard a little of it in this work. He's a wonderful composer. Composers like Rimsky-Korsakov and Stasov, the person who spoke to Engel to get him to write Jewish music, were really encouraging the establishment of such a school, and certainly Michal Gneeson's part in it. How about this one? Stravinsky knew Gneeson, Igor Stravinsky, and he says the following, just quote, "Gneeson himself was a striking figure, striking character. He dressed as an Orthodox Hebrew, but at the same time was identified with radically anti-sectarian political and social views. I once sent him a note after we had dined together, saying that I was delighted by our sympathetic understanding. So he answered me in a surprising and slightly shocked tone, saying that he was sorry, but I had been mistaken. He had felt I had no such sympathy. That was typical of Gneeson, and I suppose it explains why I remembered him." It's an interesting story. He, after the revolution, initially his music fares quite well, but he writes things like songs from the old country, a Jewish thing, the Maccabees, an opera, the Youth of Abraham, Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. There's a piece called The Jewish Orchestra at the Ball of the Town Bailiff. Red-Headed Motala is another piece. 10 Jewish songs. So he's keeping on writing Jewish material. He goes to Palestine, becomes disenchanted, returns to the Soviet Union, and then he does not do much after that, and he passes away in 1957. Moving on to the next composer. This is a wonderful composer. His name is Alexander Krein, Soviet composer, born in 1883. But someone passes away in 80. Doesn't Wagner pass away in 83? I'm not sure. I think so. Anyway, he's born in Staraya Ruza in the Moscow area. His family is steeped in the klezmer tradition. His father, Abram, who moves to Russia from Lithuania, was a very famous violinist. All the 7 Krein brothers received their first musical training from him and became musicians. Alexander and another brother made names for themselves as composers. He, at the age of 14, he enters the Moscow Conservatory, studies cello and composition with Taneyev and Yavorsky. These are wonderful composers. He then joins the Society for Jewish Music, writes a good amount of music Jewish. And I want to play a piece called Ekoses Hebraic, which is a beautiful piece for string quartet and clarinet. Really beautiful. Not sure we can play through the whole thing, but I'll give some of it. etc. We can go. That was most of it, actually. Really beautiful music, and by the way, it's all published. So any of you are interested in the performers or want to hear it, it's there. It's there. Not done often enough, I think. This is a really great violinist and composer, Yosef Achron, born in 1886, passes away in 1943. He was pretty much next to Yasha Heifetz, Ephraim Zimbalist, Misha Elman, one of Leopold Auer's most gifted students in the St. Petersburg Conservatory. He continues his studies in 1904 and 1905 with Joseph Joachim, who, by the way, for those of you who don't know this, was the violinist that Johannes Brahms wrote his violin concerto for. So he becomes a violinist of pretty international reputation and a well-known composer. In 1922, Achron goes to Berlin, assuming directorship, together with Michael Knissen, which we talked about already, of a Jewish music publishing company called Yivne. And the next to Joel Engel's Yuval Press, Yivne was a center of activity for the Berlin Jewish community of Russian Jewish immigrants. It's amazing because, wow. So they had two Jewish music publishing companies in the city of Berlin in 1922. I think we have one in the whole country here in the United States, which is transcontinental. They do a good job. But Berlin was for Achron only a stopping point. And obviously both the publishers, because of what was going on in Europe, vanished from the Berlin scene. But unlike many of his colleagues, Achron did not face time in the Gulag. He leaves the Soviet Union in time, begins in 1925. He moves to the United States, but finds very little recognition as a composer. He writes his first violin concerto under Serge Kouzovitsky and a second concerto, I believe Heifetz played one of them, if I'm not mistaken, under Otto Klemperer, but his music never really achieves acceptance in America. After his premature death, he dies in 1943, his friend and a great composer, one of the two great composers of the 20th century, I believe, Arnold Schoenberg, notes in Achron's obituary. By the way, Schoenberg writes a piece called Kol Nidre. And, it's not the Kol Nidre we know, but because Schoenberg is very intensely involved in his Judaism toward the middle and end of his life, writing Moses and Aaron, as some of you we've talked about in a previous chat. But he writes Kol Nidre, and for synagogue, I can't remember the name of it, in San Francisco. So they do the premiere of the Kol Nidre there with a rabbi speaking the whole thing, and the concertmaster happens to be Joseph Achron of that little orchestra that premiered the Schoenberg. But Schoenberg writes about Achron. He says, Achron was one of the most undervalued of modern composers, but the quality of his music ensures it a future. I think, let's try this. Okay, this is a famous piece called A Jewish Melody. I know that many of you have seen the movie, I can't remember the name of it now, a Spielberg movie where Mr. Williams, the composer, John Williams, writes a piece for violin, and everybody knows it. This was written way before that, and I think it has some of the same melodic directions, except, I do like this one a lot. Here we go. Just let's listen. He's a wonderful violinist and pianist. Such a beautiful piece. Um, Guy Brunstein was the violinist. It's called Hebrew Melody. It's a Jewish melody. It's Hebrew Melody of Joseph Achron. Moving on, I don't know the name of the pianist because it did not, in the place I got it from, did not mention his name. So, but he was awfully good, I think. Very quickly, I want to play one little thing for those people who might be watching that have been in our choir. See if you remember this one by Joseph Achron in Salzigen Yam, just the opening part, just that you know it. He wrote this. And moving on. And that was also Joseph Achron. Just give you, for those who had a little experience with his choral music. Alexander Veprik. I'm going to move quickly here because we're close to the end. Born 1899, dies in 1958 in Moscow. One of the, probably sheer talent, one of the real talented of all of them. He writes music that's a little more modern in scope harmonically than some of the other composers that you've heard. Let's just play the opening of his, I think it was called Variations on, no, it's a suite for violin and piano. That's not the one. Here we go. Again, I couldn't play the whole thing, but you can see it's really, it's got a lot of, you have to be a really good player to play these things. And by the way, those of you who are listening, or all of you, you can notice it's even in a piece called Suite for Violin and Piano, there's real Jewish elements in the melodies and stuff. And that's really important to notice. This is a wonderful composer. My name is Zalman Rozovsky. Born in 1878 in Riga, and in 1962, I believe he passes away in New York. He passed away, obviously before I got there in 1962, but the latter years he spends in New York. He teaches at the Cantor Institute of the Jewish Theological Seminary. His magnum opus is the Cantillation of the Bible, 5 Books of Moses, published in 1957. There have been newer, updated versions of that technique, and all of them good, certainly one by Josh Jacobson, but this is the one that probably generates all the ones that come after it. He is a wonderful composer. He's also a cantor. He's son of a cantor. And let me just, again, a minute of his and then one more piece and then we're done. This is Ich bin a Balagole, when I was a driver of a wagon. It's a kind of a funny song, and we'll play a little of it.
Ich bin ein Balagole und ich arbeite an Eck. Ich spiel mir ob eine kleine Rolle und ich fuhr weg. Weggefahren, voller Weit, Kiefer seit Schein und zu tun. Viola, 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 Viola. Ich bin auf alle Kohle und ich arbeite an Eck. Ich spiel mir ab eine kleine Rolle und ich fuhr weg. Weggefahren, volle Weit mit Weiber. Sei Geiger, sei Geiger, los in seine Leiber. Sei Geiger, los in seine Leiber. Jo, 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 jo.
Kind of a fun song, right? And then this is a guy named Israel Brandeman. We won't play any of his music, a wonderful composer. I want to do some of his stuff at a later chat. Now, I just want to say one thing. We're ending with this, and I hope you don't mind me keeping this going on a little longer than 1 o'clock. Hanina Kharshevsky. He's not part of the St. Petersburg music school, as was not the composer of the Mechorati. Now, the composer of the Mechorati, I should say, the melody of it was not Jewish. He was, Grishaninov, excuse me. And now this Hanina Kharshevsky is an Israeli composer, born in Petrovka, Bessarabia in Russia. He moves, studies, Jewish liturgy and that kind of thing, Torah. Same time, he learns piano and notation with his teacher, who was also a cantor. He was heard as a boy by the well-known cantor Zadel Rovner, who convinced Kharshevsky's parents to move to Kishinev so the child can join the synagogue choir. Why else move there? So at the age of 22, after that experience, he conducts an army orchestra. And he's a big supporter of Zionism at that point. He immigrates to the land of Israel in 1908 during the second Aliyah. He teaches music there in several different establishments, among which one of them was the Herzliya Hebrew Gymnasium, where he founds the orchestra and a choir. They perform all around Israel. They perform the inauguration ceremony of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's famous for composing children and pioneer songs. And I'd like to talk about him at a later date, but I want to play one little piece at the end. And this is a piece I wrote for the wonderful singer Ellery Mirabel, but I don't have the recording of her doing it. I do have the recording of another friend of mine with the wonderful cantor Gideon Zelamar, and we're going to play that. And Kharshevsky ends his life in 1925, leaving a mother and a pregnant sister. Everything, a lot about his life is unclear, but he writes these beautiful, beautiful songs. Now, the other part of it is that the poetry is by a master poet, Jacob Fichtman. And I want to talk about his poetry. I keep saying in a later chat. I don't know how many later chats we're going to do. We may do many. But I want to maybe have a chat uniting poetry and music. I think that might be very, very interesting. So this is a piece called Agadat Kinneret. I just want to say one thing before we start this piece. All this music, pretty much 90% of the music that I presented, talks about a dream world. A world, and I said this twice or three times already, a world where the Jew can, I should say the Jew that was, a part of that Eastern European experience with the pogroms and everything else, that they could finally say they can run their lives the way they wanted to. So even Agadat Kinneret is a kind of a dream kind of thing. Talks about, if the poetry, I remember the poetry is on the sides of the lake of the Kinneret, there's an old castle building, and the building is next to this magical forest. And in this forest, there's a little boy all alone, but he studies Torah with the prophets and the masters. That I assume they're not with him, but they're spiritually with him or whatever. And by the Yam Kinneret, by the waters of the Sea of Galilee, by the waters of the Sea of Galilee. So that's, again, the orchestration is mine, and we play it. Here we go. There's so much more music to be heard, so much more of this stunning, beautiful music. I just want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for taking this. And we looked at, I'm not sure if I'll be next week with everything going on with preparing for the holidays, but I'll let you know as soon as I can. But, you know, what I want to say is this music is, for me, in some levels, healing music with everything going on now with the pandemic and everything else. So thank you all for being here. Really means a lot.
Yeah, we need it. We need it.
Definitely.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Joseph. Beautiful.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Reverend Ness.
So much.
Absolutely, Johnny.
Thanks, Joseph. This was great.
Thank
You. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. It was nice to hear my mom.
That was beautiful. That was
that's
beautiful.
We're going to hear you on another one too, by the way. I have some
It's
stuff.
okay.
Great.
Hi, Ellery.
Hi, Diane. Hi,
Hi,
Ross. Hi,
everybody.
everyone. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, hi.
Yes.
Loved hearing your mom.
Yes, beautiful.
Hi, Diane.
Hi,
Yes,
Alexandra.
yes.
Nice to see you all. Miss you all.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody,
Bye-bye.
take care.
You too.
Bye, Cantor. Thank you, Joseph.